Well, peace and blessings. How Hunter children to do? We're so glad that Hunter done come true for zooming in upon sustainability. If Hunter ain't know who this shall be, this shall the Queen Quet, head from the body of the Gullah Geechee Nation. So glad that Hunter to take this your time for join we as we crack we teeth about being anti-racist this your day and thing like that. Before we go into that discussion and thing, we could do what we always do right here upon zooming in. Right here in the Gullah Geechee Nation, we're going from Jacksonville, North Carolina, down to Jacksonville, Florida, right of us all the way inland, the St. Johns River. This your thing called transatlantic slave trade. This your thing, we'll call the building of this your thing, what we call a construct, racism. All come out of that crime against humanity. So this your day, we have to think of not robbery, for take some time for us, for pay homage, and take a moment of silence for all them will suffer through Jim Crow, for all them will be lynched and killed and things like that. Why? Just because the skin will look like this show. People have been cracky, people have story on them, all that kind of thing. And then they are now strange fruit. So let we take a moment of silence before we go on into more about the truth. Ashe. Ashe, Ashe. Well, thank you. I'm so glad that all 100 children have joined. We one more again. As I stated, share the Queen Quet head from the body of the Gullah Geechee Nation. I also the founder of the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition. So I can crack my teeth like this year, but we can also crack my teeth with plenty of members what they around the world doing and things like that, and which is to speak this way. And I think it's very important today to ensure that I speak in this language so that those who are engaging in viewing this today will truly, as I like to say, overstand, and you may say understand, what we are talking about. As the world knows, unless somehow you live on a more isolated island than I do, the world knows that there has been a consistent, loud cry under the current banner of Black Lives Matter. And why do I say the current banner? Because I can recall the banners that Ida B. Wells created that said a man had been lynched today, and how there was a movement to hang those banners outside of windows on the sides of the buildings in urban centers up north every day, because she didn't want anyone to forget. She didn't want people, especially people of African descent that had migrated. Now they call it the Great Migration, that had gone north, to forget why they left the South. Largely they left the South, not because they just wanted a change of atmosphere. They largely left because even the people who owned their own things, whether that was owning a business, whether that was owning land, whether that was owning their own religious centers, whether that was owning of themselves and owning who he be, that was under threat. They were terrorized if they showed any level of advancement and pride. We have not finished that, unfortunately. If we start from when race was constructed, built, put together, we have to think back to the 1600s. We have to think back to the crime against humanity. We have to think back to who was leaving their homes and their countries and their continent to go to Al-Kebulan, the motherland, to go to Mother Africa, to then make captives of the people there, extract them, mine them out, then write about us as black gold, black cargo, extract out the knowledge, the wealth, the humanity from that continent, and disperse it where it could be sold. Commodify it, capitalize on it. And then you come to a place where the indigenous people already are. It's not vacant space. It's not as people like to say a lot of times when they come to the Gullah Geechee Nation and see the trees like what you see behind me, and I would hope during Earth Month you see more trees, and I hope you planted some as well. But when people see this, they say, oh, it's undeveloped land. And then you bring bulldozers in, which only bring destruction. Well, before it wasn't that. You brought in guns, you brought in chains, you brought in nets to capture people and then bring the destruction to numerous communities, to numerous families, to cause the ma'afa, to cause a diaspora. And then after this diaspora has been created, to then denigrate the people who didn't want to migrate. They weren't migrating on their own in this manner and by this many people at one time. There was forced migration, removal from the motherland first. Then there was another forced migration during what we call the Jim Crow era from the South for Black people that had been those descendants of those Black people who had been enslaved due to the crime against humanity called the transatlantic slave trade. So today on zooming in on sustainability, I want you to look closely. If you need to put on some more spectacles like this so you can see clearly what we talk about, please do. But more than that, I want you to look with this, with your spiritual eye. I need you to think and feel with your being today about being humane. And if you do that, then you can help to deconstruct what I said was constructed due to the crime against humanity. The way in which to justify enslaving other individuals is to other them. So the easy way to other the children of Mother Africa, the easy way to other indigenous people from Europeans was by the tone of the skin. One group with this tone, another group with this tone or lighter than this tone. So why don't we separate based on these things? And what did we end up with? Race. Not race, but race. But today, I want us to take race another way. Let us race toward a new world where we deconstruct racism, which is a systemic problem. But the system in North America, especially, and many other places around the world, was built on this construct of race. And America was built directly out of transatlantic slave trade, therefore setting up a system of exploitation and oppression of anyone that looked like me. And that was supposed to be in perpetuity. But fortunately, the same way I said we've heard these cries now under this banner now, there were those cries before under a different banner, abolition. There were the abolitionists that were of all races, but guess what? They didn't come in the field to anybody here in a place like the Gullah Geechee Nation or down in the deep South and tap folks on the shoulder and say, hey, do you want to get out of there? No, people self-emancipated. And then they got to tell their story. And because they told the truth, they told the brutality, they told the evil treatment that they had received. They told how they were treated not just like chattel property, but like cattle. Like you could beat it, you could tie it up, you could move it out, you could feed it when you want to, starve it when you want to, give it water when you want. This is how human beings that were people of African descent were treated. And then when I want to slaughter you, I'll do that too. That part didn't end with abolition. That part didn't end with the end of the US Civil War. That part didn't end with Reconstruction. In fact, it increased during Reconstruction with the founding of groups like the Ku Klux Klan and all of these groups that have emerged since then that ascribe to the same philosophies, which is white supremacy, which is the annihilation of the other. And unfortunately, Black people, Indigenous people, Latin people, we're considered that other group. Asian people, we are considered that other group. So here it is that people will say, when someone says someone from this other group will often say to Anglo people, that comment is not appropriate. That's disrespectful to us. Oh, get over it. What's wrong? It was a joke. Or, oh, why are y'all still talking about slavery? It's over. Why do we have to talk about this? Because silence gives consent. So if you're not speaking against it, it appears you're for it, that you're for crimes against humanity continuing to be perpetuated against people because they have melanin in their skin. If you are not going ahead and saying to even someone else that you know is plotting and planning, in their minds, the way they behave, their conversation says that they are saying things that are against an individual because of their race or because of their ethnicity, then you are part of the issue. And I know I've been hearing it from all different corners of the earth. Oh, I'm not a racist. Oh, I grew up in a certain era of time and we learned this. All of us learn things growing up, but that doesn't mean you can't unlearn them. At some point, you have to take responsibility for the choices you make. So if you want to just be honest and say, I'm honestly racist and I'm not going to change, that's one thing. But don't honestly sit there if a Black person, if you want to call us BIPOC person, is saying to you that what you're saying is offensive, what you're saying is racist, what you're saying is offensive to my soul and my spirit. And if I'm not in the room, what do you say then? Are you silent while I'm there, but in your mind, you're thinking something else? You're thinking about how you do wish I wasn't there? You thinking about how you wish you could get rid of me? All those are the things that went into this construction of race, that if you only see people in a minimal sense as tools, as items, as chattel, as something that can be commodified, and you're an Anglo person and the person you're thinking of in that way looks like me or pretty close to it, they're melanated in some way, some shape, some form, we're going to be talking about what that means today. But if you have the finances, if you have the political will, if you have the ability to now be a part of a system that doesn't change and let everybody have justice, equity, and equality, because equity and equality are not the same things. And we did a show about that already. Y'all can go to gullahgeechee.tv and find that episode, gullahgeechee.tv. Then you are part of the systemic racism. You're part of the system that allows it to continue to operate, whether you realize it or not, whether you recognize the definition of actual racism. The definition of racism is not the same thing as prejudice. They're not one and the same. And so today I brought a person on that my sister and I have had a very interesting discussion on her show that I love the title of, which is So Please Understand. So it is wonderful to have an opportunity to bring to you, of course, as we close our Earth Month, someone whose name is Holly, right? So why not bring someone natural, whose name is natural, to you during Earth Month? But why have to bring her in to talk about this topic? Because it's so critical as women that are in the media, women who are melanated, women who are being asked by so many different people that we know from different walks of life, is what they're doing okay now? We don't mind that, because we know that those are folks who really do want to change, who really do want to be a part of dismantling this system of racism. So Holly, how Hunter chilling to do? What going on down in Florida? Because I know when we talk of Florida, a lot of people already think, oh my goodness, with all of what's going on there. but it ain't like it's just Florida. There is racism, unfortunately, almost everywhere. So how have you been in the midst of all of this, my sister? You look great, but how are things going?
Doing well. I think I've been busy just educating people on what it means to be anti racist. And that's where my passion and my work has led me. And even during the pandemic, it hasn't stopped me. So, yes, just passionate. And I love educating people on this topic. Having these conversations are so important. And so, yes, I'm doing well and excited to be here and talking to you again, Queen Quet.
I am so happy to be talking to you again, especially about this topic. But let's start people at the beginning, because you know the perpetual professor in me always wants to make sure that the whole class is somewhat up to speed, or at least we start from the same location. Now, we know in a race that I said, everybody don't break the tape at the same time. Then
Right.
we might start off fast and some slow down and some fall out the race. But we got to race toward justice. We got to race toward equality. We got to race toward equity. The time is out. When Dr. King said, you know, that now recognize the urgency of the moment. People thought that was an urgent moment. They thought they recognized it, but plenty of people missed it. And
Absolutely.
unfortunately, we're right there. Right now, people are missing it because people are going around saying, well, I'm not I'm not racist. I can't be racist. Please explain what the word racist means. What is racism? Before we can talk about being anti something, we need to talk about what it is.
Right. So, racism, okay? It's prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed towards against someone or a different race based on the fact that one is superior, one's own race is superior.
Okay.
Okay. So, I when you talked about the slave trade, and we talked about even going all the way back to Africa, and you and I were going to talk about history. We got to address history first before we
Mm-hmm.
get to how we can be
Right.
anti-racist.
Racist, right.
Nice. So people in Africa, Africans, we were already doctors, lawyers. We already had our own language. It's not like we just got on a boat and we didn't know what we were doing, and
Right.
coming to America made us better. Like, that's
Right.
not how this worked. Okay.
No, it's
And I
not.
and I think people need to really go and find resources
Mm-hmm.
about African civilizations
Mm-hmm.
prior to slavery
Exactly.
to really understand that no, people had their own languages, way of life,
Right.
their
Their
own
own
medicine.
kingdoms, their own
Yes,
medicine. We developed the writing system the world uses.
yes,
Math was created in Mother Africa, the whole 9 yards, our own libraries. Look at Kush,
yes.
look at Kemet, all of these things. We had all of that there. Yes.
So to say one is superior, so who is to say that one is superior over the other? Like, who made that decision when it's like we were fine by ourselves,
Yep.
undisturbed?
Yep.
But what's presented here in America is that no, we made it better for them. Look, we brought them over here. And it's
Mhm.
just like, that's not,
It's
that's
not
just
the
not true.
story.
That's not the
Right.
full story.
That's not the
And,
story.
and
As
I,
they say, we rescued you from the dark continent. Remember that?
yeah, I
You know,
know.
we said that even in so-called his storybooks, the dark continent. Excuse us?
Right.
Like, in what way? What do you mean by that? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when it's like you said, people come to Africa to mine the minerals and take
Extract.
extract, like you were saying. We like the way you guys grow rice, and we like the way you guys farm, and then we're gonna bring that over
And
here.
we like your gold. We want
Yes,
your
the
gold.
gold. Yes,
Even our cell phones have the various things. And where do you think they get them? Still
yes.
extracted from the motherland. And then what's the song? Diamonds are a girl's best friend.
Dress.
More extraction. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm. But
And
much less the intellectual extraction.
yes, it's just like you have to think a lot of these slaves were taken care of the slave owner's children and the household. So it's like, it's not like, where did they learn these medicinal ways? They already had them. It's not like, I think that's like someone gave us something. And I think that's just inaccurate. And I think that's one thing, if you're trying to understand how to be anti-racist, is really examining history and trying to really make your own accurate of kind of understanding really what happened. Like if you were to like take everything together and form your own opinion, you'd realize like, oh wow, that was definitely left out. I didn't know that. So maybe that really wasn't the way it was told. So yeah,
But
that's
now you're talking about the intellectual skills and capacity I'm talking about though.
yeah,
As a computer scientist and mathematician, you have to have logic and you have to have deductive reasoning to do what you just said. And as a historian, you really better have those because you will have a multiplicity of documents spread out before you. You'll read 2, 3 books, they contradict each other.
yes,
So you have to have deductive reasoning, which is why these dialogues are important. Because if you and I are both looking at the same set of historic materials or reading the same books, we can dialogue. If I say, well, Holly, did it strike you that they skipped over an entire period of time?
yes.
Then you can say, yeah, it struck me too. That's why I have this other book, or here's this other literature to couple with that. And that's what, people love videos now.
Yes.
But we know that every other person's putting a video out there now. It doesn't make it accurate. In fact,
Yes.
a lot of it is propaganda to reinforce racist narratives, to reinforce what was called a lost cause doctrine that was
Yes.
used to create the history books of America. So what would you say if a person says, well, yeah, I thought something seemed a little strange, but I didn't really think it was that much missing because I was just learning about this. I didn't know that there were any African kingdoms. I didn't know there were any African queens like Nzinga. I never heard of that. How do you know it's true? Maybe that's just mythology like the Greeks have. So what do you do with a person like that? They're not going to go get that extra set of material. They're not going to be in a dialogue with other people that are also truly seeking. They're just right there in their world, in their construct, talking to people that sound like them, look like them, know what they know, and they're not going any further. What do you do?
And you're right. That's actually a really good question, as I think that's right part of the problem. But what I always do is I've always welcomed those conversations, and I'm always just ready to provide resources and information. This is fine. If you don't want to hear it from me, here's some books or here's some documentaries I suggest that you watch. I'm always about recommending documentaries or books on certain topics because you're right. Because I think it is that it's like you're telling somebody something and they're like, well, how do you know? What's your proof? What's your facts? And even if you said, well, here's all the facts, here's all the proof, I got pictures,
Right.
they'll be like, yeah, no, because my teacher told me so. So
Or my
that
mom or my dad
my
didn't
mom
tell
told
me.
me so.
Yeah.
They can't
So
be wrong. And
it
I'm
can't
just
be.
like,
Yeah.
no, they absolutely can be wrong. But that's okay, because sometimes people realize you don't know what you don't know. But
That's
you gotta welcome the constructive feedback. You have to welcome people saying, okay, you kind of get it, but here's some resources to help fill in those gaps. That's
right.
that's missing. And I think that's part of the problem, is that, as we know, there's an educational gap in this
Yeah.
country, and then the narrative that is taught in the American education system. I mean, history starts with slavery and the Civil War. I mean,
Sure does.
like,
Yeah.
okay, that's it. That's just our
Yeah, that's it.
introduction.
Yeah, that's the introduction. Like, just all of a sudden we're just here, we're on a plantation. Then they tell you about cotton. And then
Yeah.
then they tell you about tobacco. And then the next thing they say, and Abraham Lincoln set them free. And then Martin Luther King was born. That's how the books are written in
I know
America.
they are. Exactly. No, that's how it was for me in school. And we're talking like early 90s. You know what
Oh
that's
my
like,
God. And they still were doing that? Okay.
yes, that's what I'm saying. No, I remember getting, when I was in high school, I was like, oh, Barack Obama made the book. Like they updated the history book
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
update. But outside of that, it still was the same narrative. You
All right.
never heard like the true atrocities that happened on these
Absolutely.
plantations.
Right.
And
Right.
it wasn't until the movies kind of started coming out in the later 2000s that you would see, um, you know, we all like we knew about like the breeding beds if you actually studied the history, but to fully visually see that, I mean, I don't think people realize, like they thought, oh, we just worked, we got whipped, and we went home and just
Mm,
took it. And it's just like, no, there's worse, like
yeah. Way worse things
way
that
worse.
yeah, that people haven't even put out there. One documentary that I found online, and I need to check after this episode to see if it's still up there,
Okay.
is Goodbye Uncle Tom. And because we have in the Gullah Geechee Al archive
Okay.
that book, Goodbye Uncle Tom. But when I found that video on YouTube, I was stunned. And I said, really? So when I put it on and saw that they actually showed the atrocities,
Oh,
all the viciousness, not only the rape of the women, but rape of men. I
mhm.
mean, this violence that they just showed you. You know, a lot of people, 12 Years a Slave was their kind of introduction to
Yeah.
seeing something like that. I had seen Mandingo, you know, way back in the day. I know some of y'all in here like, yeah, she dating herself now. Yeah, I am, just so y'all get it. But so, you know, going from Mandingo to Roots to then seeing, you know, the horrors of Rosewood finally on film. They
Yes.
still haven't put on film Black Wall Street fully. You
Yep.
know, they're working on that. And what happened with Tulsa, but going to Tulsa,
Yes.
meeting people there, knowing the families, you know, embracing them, hearing them tell me the story, and then having them take me and show me the pictures.
Mm.
Like you talked about the evidence and to see the atrocities, to see that just because Black people had survived the chattel enslavement,
Yep.
they had survived the Jim Crow era, they had proceeded with being self-sufficient, and they had a whole town, a whole Greenwood, the whole place is set up. We're doing for ourselves, we're not bothering nobody. So you bomb us?
Right.
And to see like Move, I think it was the anniversary of the bombing of Move in Philadelphia recently, and now it's just emerging that there is a professor that actually has the bones of the children
Wow.
who were, yes, that who were children that were in the building in Philadelphia when, because this was again a Black liberation group that was just saying, leave us alone.
Mm-hmm.
Our last names are Africa because we are representing Africa here. We have
Mm-hmm.
our own real estate. We have our own life. We're raising our children. We're educating them. They're not bothering nobody. They're just saying, leave us alone. Let us be, like how we were in Africa. Here we go again,
Right.
bomb them. So now all these bombings and these atrocities that are in the 1900s, the 1900s,
Yes.
people aren't aware of, much less what you're talking about, where the documentaries are finally leaking out about the 17 and the
Yes.
1800s atrocities. But look at how many more there are in the 1900s. And unfortunately, we got atrocities right now with the
Yes.
brutalities and the murders and the lynching by knee and the lynching by cop with guns constantly,
Yeah.
and which police forces came from paddy rollers and slave patrols.
Yes.
So how does, when we think about that, it's a system that really hasn't changed. It might change names, but the system hasn't really changed. So when you do your courses on
Mhm.
trying to teach people about racism and being anti-racist, how can you really teach that? How do you do that?
Right. So I think for how I do it is I always start with history, explaining to people that indigenous people, Africans, we before they came to America had their own ways of life. I think that's the one thing, is actually educating people on history a bit, to explain like whatever you learned in the American public school system, there was just some things missing, not some, but a lot of things
A whole
missing.
lot, a whole
A lot
lot.
of things missing. That minimizes the experience of minorities in this country and their contributions and their history, and almost it really, just the best way to describe it, erase like
That's,
our erase our existence to some degree, unless it's beneficial to
there
help.
we go. Say that again.
Right. It's beneficial to helping, white people. And it's what are those things? So I always start there. And then it's not always about saying, okay, this is what unconscious bias is and isn't. This isn't what, not just to give examples. So they just make sure people are like, okay, let me not make sure I don't do this.
Like check off the box. Yeah.
Right. Like we've had enough of that. That goes into that, like, I'm trying to be non-racist. What
Mhm.
about being anti-racist? And that's when I've started saying, let's have a conversation. So giving people resources, telling people, like, it's not about just like not doing anything so you're not racist. It's like you have to take an active, like actively, like you've said, like calling somebody out, being like, yeah, no, that's racist, you can't say that. Or if you don't know about something that people are talking about, go look it up. Don't go ask your Black friend or your other friends of color. Like, you do the research. There is actually tons of books on Amazon. You can Google, YouTube.
Mhm.
Are great resources to really educate yourself on these topics. If you want to learn more about Indigenous history, African American history, like, just, I just think people need to be more willing to just go and do the research themselves,
True.
and and that will help and inform their decisions on how they can be anti-racist, even in their own communities, in their workplace. And so that's how I go about
Mhm.
doing it, is allowing people to say, hey, I didn't know. Okay, that's fine, you don't know, but here's some resources. You need to go,
Now you
you
can.
need to get inform yourself.
Yeah. And like we say, and when Hannah know better, Hannah supposed to do better. So it's
Yeah.
not just a matter of it being just a perfunctory exercise, like you said, and checking off boxes. Oh, I did read that book. I read those 5 books you gave me. You know, I watched that video. I binge watched all the videos this weekend. So now I'm anti-racist. No,
Nope.
no,
It's like the first step
no.
one.
There's work here to dismantle racism. You have to put in effort and take it apart one by one, day by day, slow but sure. And speaking of that, right before we came on the air, I went to check my email, make sure everything else in the world was good. And instead, it wasn't.
Mm.
I saw that here, just north of me in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, just north of the Gullah Geechee Nation, the family and the lawyers for the family of the brother who's recently shot 5 times, they were having a
Okay.
press conference about how the judge has said that they won't release the body cam footage. So when you say do your research, and when you say work on being anti-racist, and Black people are still trying to even grapple with getting their minds around the fact that now we have things literally documented, and all we're saying is show it to everybody. Let us all see it. At least let the family have it for court. And judges in a system
Mhm.
get to make a decision that another system, a police force that came out of slave patrols, can just have the body cam, but if it shows something you don't want us to see, you just keep it. Like,
Right.
how can people balance all of that, in the midst of this? And what would you say to a person who identifies themselves as Anglo or white, who's in North Carolina in particular, and this is going on and it's playing out in the headlines, it's playing out over Twitter and social media now? What would you say to them if they said, well, I just feel so sad about that? What would you say if that's what they have to offer in regard to things like this that are systemic?
Absolutely. So this is the one thing. If you say you feel sad, that's too bad. You better pick up a pen. You better start writing a letter, start typing some emails, making some phone calls. That if you have any power or any type of financial pull to pull resources together to kind of make some phone calls. I think that's what people don't realize. It's not always like, if we realize, if it was like, okay, just donating money will solve all problems. We know money does not solve all problems,
Problems, right?
but if you have power of any type or the ability or pull, make those phone calls, gather people together and write letters that, not write letters, but send emails. I've seen people on social media posts, blow up their phone number, send emails here. We need to petition
Mm-hmm.
this. I mean, I just think those are ways to be active, that say, if you're not necessarily comfortable being in the forefront or showing your face, but you know people who know people, make some phone calls,
Yeah. Make
have a
some connections.
yeah,
Mm,
like use your connections, use your power to
you bet.
help those. I think that's I that's really how you can help be anti-racist, is just we don't need people to necessarily feel bad. I think we need people to help be a part of the action and dismantling the systems. And I think that's part of it. And especially, I think white people need to understand racism is a system that they created. And so they have to be part of the solution and helping dismantle it. I mean, it just, because I think it's like for it's sometimes it seems like people of color are being, we're complaining or are being victims. And I
Mhm.
think that's just not true. I think we're really asking for allyship and someone to say,
Right.
hey, this isn't right. Help us
Right. Right.
eradicate, break this system. And
Right.
I'm hoping that within the last year, due to George Floyd's murder and
Mhm.
the racial
John
disparities that
Taylor's murder, Ahmaud Arbery's murder.
yes, all those murders, I really hope people realize like action isn't always just like marching. Okay,
Right.
like there's other things you can do. And I watched Angela Rye on I think it was like MSNBC, and she literally was like, white people, she's like, if you have any type of power pull, uh, well, she was like, help us like make these moves and connections to like to stop this from,
Happen.
minimizing our voices. Yeah.
Right. And as you were talking, I saw a building, like we've been talking about deconstructing, right?
Mhm.
But I saw a building getting constructed, a new building.
Yes.
Let's live in a new house. The old house is on fire, it's
Yeah.
burning down. So let's build a new house. And I'm thinking about how we can look at it.
Right.
If our Anglo allies are on the inside of the house, and you have the hammer and the nails, and you trying to go ahead, you putting the insulation in, and you trying to put the boards on the inside of the house, Holly and I might be the people framing the windows from the outside and putting the window in there. We might be the ones that's making sure the post beams on this front wall are upright and putting that board from this side up. And so we have to look at it as all of us, if we are going to, if this other house is burning down, whether you threw gasoline on the fire or not, if you threw the Molotov cocktail or not, if the other house is burning down, where do we all live?
Yes.
I would rather live in a new house that we all construct together, where we're all respected for our contributions to building
Yes.
that house, than to try to keep staying in one that's on fire, that's burning down, talking about something. Well, I didn't set the blaze. So even though you didn't set the
Right.
blaze, doesn't mean you want us all to sit there and burn together, just die. I mean, because that's the attitude. Like when you even
Yes.
said, well, it's a construct, and white people need to admit you created it. I already heard in my head someone white, someone Anglo saying, I didn't, but it's not me. I could just hear it. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, those
Oh,
are my
absolutely.
ancestors. I didn't have anything to do with that. Those are your ancestors that were enslaved. You didn't have anything to do with that. I have everything to do with that because
Yes.
my ancestors' blood pulses through my veins right now. I literally live on property that they were enslaved on. I feel them every time I'm in the field. You can't tell me I'm disconnected from that, just as much as you aren't disconnected from what your family collective consciousness is and what traits and behaviors and mannerisms and mores and wealth and power
Yeah.
they passed down to you or shifted over to you. So all I'm saying is we're saying shift some of that power in the direction of dismantling the burning house.
Yes. I think
Yeah.
that's such a valid, it's just, it's like when you tell people, hey, about like white privilege. Well, I wasn't privileged. I was poor.
Oh, yes.
But it's like, no, it's if it's not, remember, it's not about you. If you really think like
That's the point.
objectively about what privilege is, it's the narrative that even the poorest white person is still better than even
Right.
the richest
Which
black
is back
person.
to
It
white
doesn't matter.
supremacy. Right.
Yes. Like
Back to
people
the white
have
supremacy. Like
to,
you said, racism is predicated on whatever I have being more superior to whatever you have. So if
mm,
that's your life, that's your skin, that's your neighborhood, that's your school,
right.
that's your whatever, I feel I'm superior to you. That's what it's predicated on. And white supremacy, manifest destiny, all of
Mhm.
that is tied together. And and I hadn't thought of this for a while, but you probably won't be surprised, Holly, since you told me you're one of my, as I like to call y'all, my stalker fans. Like y'all have been around, following me for a while before I ever heard from you, before I ever got to know you. But y'all, I love y'all because y'all are like right there. You have my back, even though I don't see you at first. But the
Mhm.
thing is, years ago, I served on a group that, number one, I was one of the people that worked with the National Park Service to get Harriet Tubman recognized as a national icon and a national treasure. And so we did the Harriet Tubman study, we did all this work. And then we reached a point where, okay, now great, we got the study done. Now, what are we going to do with this? Now we have to have dialogues about what will really happen to tell this as not a legend, not a child story, but
Mhm.
as the American story. It's Black history, Black her story, but it
Yeah.
is the American story. So it was so intriguing that we all met in Washington, D.C., this whole group of us scholars and activists and descendants of people who had been conductors on Underground Railroad. And there was this Anglo guy, white guy sitting right next to me, and he was so happy to meet me. And the first thing he let me know is he does Harriet Tubman tours on the Maryland Eastern Shore now, but he actually used to be a Grand Warlock. I always get it confused, Grand Warlock or Grand Wizard. I believe it's Grand Warlock of the Ku Klux Klan.
Oh,
And here yes, and he was now reformed and educating the world about Harriet Tubman and about white supremacy, in fact. And everything that was said in that meeting that day, where people were like, oh, but this is about race, he says white supremacy.
mm,
Everything people would say, oh, but this is racism. He said, y'all gonna learn. Everything's about white supremacy,
mm.
and so I was so intrigued by him and he was intrigued by me. I mean, we made this duo that no one would ever believe would be made. And the thing that stuck out for me is years before I met him, people would say, Queen Quet, you're always somewhere else. Look like you just go everywhere. I said, well, just about everywhere short of a Ku Klux Klan rally. Until one day, this brother said to me, Queen, if we give you the right security, you go to that. I said, you're right.
Mm.
Because I said, because I live on Sea Islands where it's predominantly Gullah Geechee, and we're not mad about that. And the Anglo people in our same county, they lived in town and they weren't mad about that. And we all know each other, but no one's trying to kill each other. So I
Right.
said, you know something? I said, I probably would. You're probably right. He said, I know you would. Right. So here it is, this years later, I'm sitting next to this man who actually ran the Ku Klux Klan at one point, who
Wow.
now converted, that he had a come to Jesus moment that showed him that all of that white supremacy was falsehood.
Yes.
All of it was incorrect. All of it needed to be done away with. But what did he do? Use his tools, his power, his knowledge to come into these places and influence the political structure, influence the storyline, influence how were we going to put this together to now tell the stories of Black people, tell the story of this Black woman. What else can I do to make right what I've done wrong? And
Mm.
I just loved it because later he made a comment to me during the meeting about something. He just kept whispering to me and talking to me, whispering, talking to me. And we ended up in a breakout group and he said something. And I said, you know what you do? Keep that under your hood. All the Black people in the room just fell on the table laughing. And all he could do was smile at me, And I
Yeah.
just was like, yeah, dude, like now's not the time for that. And it was so funny. But, it was amazing to be in a place, in a space with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned so much from just spending the couple of days learning from him from the other side.
Mm.
So I know if he
Yeah.
could have gone to the depths, of the KKK and emerge as a higher being with a higher calling to respect Black people, everybody can if they choose to. So it's always still about choice.
Absolutely. And I think that's why the last, we'll say last decade, the push has been not to be non-racist, but to be anti-racist. And I
Mhm.
think you've seen that Ibram Kennedy, he that's his whole push behind his book. It's not enough to be non-racist, you need to be anti-racist.
Mm.
But mind you, that's always the push, right? It's always to be anti-racist. It's not non-racist. I mean, in reality, like that's what people were fighting for, even, civil rights, even before that abolition. Like, we want you to be anti-racist. Like,
But someone sitting here saying, might be saying right now, Holly, what do you mean? Like, what does that mean? To be non-racist versus anti-racist. I mean, someone could really be sitting here grappling and saying, well, I don't know which one I am now. So why don't you break that down so that our viewers will really get what you mean when you say that?
yeah. So a good example of being non-racist, this is always a good example, is I'm not racist because I have Black friends and I treat them
Or that
well, and I support them, and I would do anything for them. Okay,
one.
so what have you done for Black people as a whole?
Here we go. I thought you was gonna do that Janet Jackson on me. What have you done for me lately?
Yeah. As a
What
whole,
have you done for me
right?
lately?
Right? That will make your friend's life much easier, and not just
Easier.
family,
Right.
friends. Where, like, that's, I think, where it's like that always. But I have Black friends, and I treat them so. I treat them so well.
And you know what my response is to that? Can I talk to them?
Yeah.
That's my response, because you're making a judgment call. They may not feel the same way. So I'd like to speak to them, and they tell me that, I probably will believe it then. But you telling me that makes it very difficult for me to believe.
Right. And I think that's the one thing too. People don't always people don't always realize, like, sometimes the things that they can say are microaggressions.
Yeah.
It's those things that they don't realize, and just sometimes we let it pass.
We let
Like,
it
yeah,
go because we just don't feel like debating and arguing every day and every
right.
hour. Well, our
And
lives are in jeopardy here. We got to use our strengths for this stuff.
correct. And I think that's when we say anti-racist is where you take a next step. Okay, yes, I have Black friends, but I care for Black Lives Matter. So I'm going to get involved, and I'm going to, the fact that, for example, I have a business that teaches financial literacy, but let me take that to communities that really need that education and help them out so we can close the wealth gap.
Health gap. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
like
a
that's,
great
I think people need
example.
to start thinking about, like, when you think about systems, the systemic issues that are in healthcare, that are in education, the criminal justice system, going into these different institutions and trying to use your resources, your knowledge, and help us,
Yeah, help
you know,
us. Yeah.
help us to really close these gaps that the systemic racism has
Existed
caused.
for centuries. Yeah.
Yes, that has existed for centuries. Like, there, people need to understand. Like, I think the always a good one is like, well, you guys, civil rights and Martin Luther King. So why is there issues with, like, there being a wealth gap and an education gap? Really? Like, because things got desegregated? Like, that just helps thing, like, we're race.
Separate but equal. Separate
Yeah.
but equal meant, yeah, you stay over there and I stay over here. But that means I also, if I'm in a wealthy, affluent neighborhood, I'm going to keep all my money over here and put it over here. And if you are in an impoverished community,
Yep.
then you stay over there and just be impoverished. So you won't have the same resources. So that separate but equal kind of attitude, people on, again, you got to study history, right? To realize all of these things and how they interlink and how they were
Yeah.
little band-aids when people are hemorrhaging.
Yes. Yes. And so that is just something that I would just implore people to really examine. Like, if you're a lawyer, maybe go and help people who
Do some pro bono work.
pro
And
bono. Yeah, like, look at those. I think we just think about certain celebrities that literally leverage their power and to,
yeah,
to get people off, that were, on death row, and
yeah,
we're willing to leverage that. But just, those are just some examples, like people saying, you know what, I have an extra building. Your community can use it for tutoring after school, or,
yeah, without paying rent or something like that.
yeah, like, just
Yeah,
those
pay
are
utilities.
actions. Yeah.
Right. Those are action steps. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I know that during this pandemic time, we're still in it. It's not over,
Mhm.
folks, unfortunately. In the midst of it, I think that's why people have had the time to pay attention. It's
Yep.
not like these are new things.
Oh,
This has been going on for eons, but God ordered the moment, that there is the urgency of the moment again for all of us to pay attention. And what saddens me in the midst of it is that when you mentioned with Brother George Floyd, God bless the dead, here it is, we get the verdict. People can't celebrate the verdict before the news cycle spins right to, okay, who else have we killed now? Okay,
I
the cops
know.
are killing more black people. They killed this one. I can't even keep track. I cannot. I would have to get a scroll now to put
Mhm.
everybody's names on, to constantly try to call out all those names in remembrance of what happened. And so it is horrific to think about the stress
Yes.
that is placed on people. So it is a good thing, though, that people were pushed, like you said, these different systems were pushed to pay so much close attention because they had the time to do it and they were sitting down and
Yep.
everybody wasn't inundated with moving around and damaging the planet with us driving everywhere.
Yep.
That we were paying more attention and more people got engaged. And one of those groups of people, the CDC, that now released their report that racism is a public health crisis. It
Yes.
is a public health problem. And I was so happy they finally did that. Not like it was new. This report could
Right.
have come out a long time ago, but now they paid attention. This was the moment that now they struck the iron while it was hot and put this report out there. And I was happy because patient safety had interviewed me last year to talk about closing those gaps in health disparities and
Okay.
how we could do that and what could be done so that communities, like they calling us now BIPOC communities, communities of people of color, especially Black communities, how do we deal with it? And like you're saying, there's a number of ways to do that. Dr. Oz ended up using his power, his platform, to
Mhm.
create a whole thing for Black doctors, to get more Black doctors. And he features them on the show to try to get more and more young people in our communities to go in the medical field.
Right.
Because why? Again, that's that house, right? If you're inside, you might be putting a wall up from the inside. If I'm
Yeah.
outside, I might be putting up this wall from the outside, and we all can construct a better house where everybody's health is taken care of. Everybody's wealth is taken care of.
Mhm.
Multi-generational wealth is taken care of.
Yes.
Everybody doesn't have to be so ill. America doesn't have to be a drug-ridden society, even with big pharma, because we would have less stress
Yes. Mhm.
overall. There wouldn't be such a public health crisis if we could all be stress-free. Not the case.
Yep.
Generationally, we have diseases in the Black community because that stress has been passed down to the very babies in the womb.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So now it's great you gave these other action steps that you gave. I love that about if you do wealth building, doing that. If you have a building, let the folks use it.
Yeah.
What would you say to a person that says today, this is a start for them? Like maybe they never even watched another video, never read any of the books you talked about, never felt comfortable talking to a Black person to say, can I ask you a question? Do you think this is racist? They never did it. But because they can be at home watching this video and nobody's there, no judgment, it pricks their minds and they say, well, I really would like to know more. I would like to do more. What do they do if they wanted to contact you to say, come in for their civic organization or come out there to that building that somebody just let one of the community members use for rent free, right?
Yeah.
What would they do? How would they get in touch with you? And what would be the steps they need to take next?
Sure, absolutely. So if you went to my website, www.hollynoon.com, I actually have a contact form where you can just fill out, hey, interested in learning more on how to be anti-racist, interested in your course, and then I will respond that way. Also on my website, I actually have a anti-racism action list that you can download for free. Okay. So for free, and it has some suggestions from the personal perspective that you can take. Okay. And also from a corporate perspective or organizational perspective that you can take. It's free. Just enter your email, download it. It's free. And then, well, I have a book that talks about understanding concepts related to racism and people of color. It's on Amazon. If you go to my website, it's at the very top. So that's my book.
Excellent. Yes.
And at the
Give
back of
out
it,
your website so they know exactly where is it that they go to get that. Where's your website? What is it?
sure, www.hollynoon.com. And that way, if you find me, if you just type in Holly Noon, yep, there, I see it in the chat.
Yep.
That way, just go there and it has everything's pretty much based on anti-racism on my website, my book, my YouTube channel, the free resource you can download, reach out to me. That's basically, and I have just, my background is in human resources. So I am a certified HR professional and I've been doing DEI work, which is diversity, equity, inclusion work for 12 plus years for various organizations. And so it's very important that if you have an interest in this, I'm very open to having conversations about this. If you just even want, just some resources just to get you started. But again, I provide them on my website. It's in my book. I literally provide parenting resources, documentaries you can watch, books you can read, podcasts you can listen to. I really kind of try to break it down to give people at least in the right direction if they're interested in really kind of just saying I'm non-racist, I'm okay. I think I treat people well, but are really trying to take those next steps. I think I provide a pretty comprehensive list.
Yeah, I think you too.
Yeah, I have a pretty comprehensive list. Literally, like my whole last chapter of my book is just list after list on how you can be anti-racist and help out. So
Excellent. Excellent. So Holly, this has been such a wonderful dialogue and discussion. Anytime you and I get together to talk, we could go for days because, about a variety of subjects, but God willing, soon we'll get to each other here because we're not that far away. You're in Florida. I'm in South Kakalaki. I'll be coming down to Florida again real soon, because we got to continue to get people to really understand what they can do. Stop saying what you can't do. Stop saying what you didn't do. We're talking about what you can do. And these are those steps to being anti-racist. It's about action. It's about all of us rebuilding the house so we can, or get rid of the burnt down house and just build a new one entirely. Yes. So thank you so much, Holly. I appreciate you. You all make sure her name is Holly Noon. All right, that's an easy name, y'all. And right there in the chat as well. We got it on screen for you, hollynoon.com. Make sure to get the book. Go to Amazon, get the book, but also at her website, like she said, she has some wonderful resources that are already there. So whether you're Black, whether you're white, whether you say you're BIPOC, you're Indigenous, if you are having these discussions about racism, being a racist, being anti-racist, all right, then here's some tools for you to use. And here on Gullah Geechee TV, I'm always telling you the slogan of the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition, which is Huna must take care of the root for heal the tree. So I always tell you, we give you some tools to dig a little deeper. And to get a new house, you need a good foundation.
Yes.
And they usually dig first so that then they pour on top. So that's the thing we want to do. We want to dig down, and that might hurt. This Earth Month, Mother Earth probably don't like us digging, okay, a whole lot. It might hurt, but you'll heal. You'll heal. Trust me. So don't feel like, oh, I'm being attacked because someone says to you, that was a racist remark. It's not about you. Like Holly said, it's not about you. It's not about what you feel. I always say to folks, well, if you feel like that, imagine how me and my people have felt for all these centuries. Then you silenced us if we said something was being done wrong. And all you got was words. Imagine what happened to us. Then that kind of levels the playing field on people speaking anymore about those kind of things. But we have to all level this field so that we can pour a new foundation, build this new house together. So thank you for all 100 children. We'll support this your broadcast so we can help to share the stories, to get this out there, to help to educate our people, but more than that, empower us so that we are better people. for the future generations. So if you wanted to look for me, you know where to find Holly at hollynoon.com. If you wanted to look for me and you want to know who I be, I'm Queen Quet, Chieftains and Head of State for the Gullah Geechee Nation. You can find me at queenquet.com. You can also get ready to watch this again at gullahgeechee.tv and follow me at Gullah Geechee on Instagram and on Twitter. Where do they follow you, Holly?
Sure, you can get me on Instagram at Holly_noon, at So Please Understand on Instagram. And as well, you can catch me on YouTube at So Please Understand.
Yep. And you can definitely always find more. And you can find the broadcast when I was on So Please Understand, both on So Please Understand and on gullahgeechee.tv. And always follow me at the Gullah Geechee Nation on Facebook or gullahgeecheenation.com. And that way you can continue to yeti more about who we be down here, but more about how we zoom in on sustainability. And truly, if we want to sustain all communities, if we want to sustain the power and the energy that can change the world for the better, there's no other way to do it than to be anti-racist, dismantle that old system, let that house burn down, let those ashes sit on the ground, but from those ashes, let's be the phoenix and rise anew and fly. And I'm ready to fly with all of you that are ready to be anti-racist. We done gave you some steps so you know what you can go on and do. Peace and blessings, y'all. Stay safe, stay healthy. Much love from the Gullah Geechee family.